for the San Diego ATD chapter's Get Good with Articulate Storyline. I'm John Morley, an external consultant, instructional design consultant. And if I can be of help to you on a project, my email address is going into the chat window. And now a quick word from our sponsors. Hey, coming up, ATD's chapter meeting 2 weeks from right now. Chapter meeting, get yourself and your team ready for AI. This is with Megan Torrance, who is a force of nature, really sharp lady. She speaks at just about every conference that has something to do with what it is that we do. First Tuesday of next month, June 3rd, generative AI, data privacy, and best practices. This is with Cambria Dunsnell, who is a returning ISPI SoCal guest speaker and is the creator of the AI Innovation Lounge website. First Friday, we have the First Friday Roundtable, in which we will be discussing an article on how to become a better listener, facilitated by Erwin Jakovic, he's on the board of directors for ISPI SoCal. A smart guy. You will want to see that. That same day, busy day, noon, we can have a lunch and learn on a Friday forum. This week they will be, or this month, they will be talking about AI's impact on learning in Sam Altman's TED Talk that he did. So this is more about AI. There might be something about that AI thing. You might want to check that out, figure out what's going on with it. And then chapter meeting for ATD on the 9th. This will be Tiffany Perry talking about leading the charge, change management. Tiffany is the CEO and founder of Ambrose Partners in Los Angeles. And then ATD gets social again on June 16th with their coffee and conversation. And I will not be here next month. Get Good with Articulate Storyline is taking off the summer, and we'll be back in August. If you would like to be a guest speaker in August or would like to nominate somebody, please let me know. Otherwise, you'll be hearing from me. Nobody knows everything about storyline, especially me. So this evening, we are very fortunate to have with us Julia Whaley, who will be sharing what she knows about storyline. Julia has over 7 years of experience in e-learning development, and for the previous 3 years, she has been working with Cinecraft Productions. She is in Los Angeles, and Cinecraft Productions is in, did you say it's in Cincinnati?
Cleveland.
Cleveland, excuse me. Julia particularly enjoys developing scenario and simulation-based training, which we will be talking about this evening. She has spoken at industry conferences, including ATD's Tech Knowledge, where I heard her, and I was obviously very impressed. She's also spoken at DevLearn and the Micro Learning Design Conference, as well as other conferences. And she was selected as a member of the 2023 Learning 30 Under 30. So with that, I'll turn it over to Julia and hear what she has to say. Julia, thank you very much for being with us this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. I will go ahead and start sharing my screen. And then in the chat, I put a link to download the storyline file that we'll be taking a look at tonight. So if you want to go ahead and download that storyline file and get that open, I will give you a second to do that. And just let me know if you encounter any issues. And if you just select the ATDST workfile.zip, that should go ahead and download a zip file, and you can just unzip that, open up the storyline file, and should get going here. So as John mentioned, my name's Julia, and I'm an e-learning developer for Cinecraft Productions. It's a custom learning development company, and my favorite training to develop is simulation and scenario-based training, where we're able to get the learner really close to the skill or behavior that they need to learn or practice. I think it's a lot of fun. So tonight I thought it would be fun to specifically look at some ways that we can provide in-course resources within our scenario or simulation-based training. Because I find a lot of times when we're creating this training that it's necessary or just nice to have kind of some additional supplemental information that's provided, via a resource to the learner to help them through the scenario or simulation that they are going through. So It might be scaffolding. It might be some additional help or pointers that maybe fades away that helps them at the beginning. Or it may be some hypothetical information to help them to complete a hypothetical scenario. It might be information they need for that. It could be a bunch of different things. But I thought we could specifically look at three different examples of ways that we could provide these resources in Storyline and how we can most efficiently develop that within Storyline, to do it efficiently, to save time, and make it really easy if it needs to be edited or changed later. So we'll be looking at a few different features within Storyline tonight. We'll look at slide masters and light boxes, which will really help us with the efficiency piece of this. And we'll look at variables and references to those variables. We'll look at states. So I do want to say if at any point you have a question about something or want to chat, have a comment, please feel free to jump in at any point tonight and we can just kind of discuss and go from there.
Now,
So
in your released a lesson with is this what the learner would be seeing, the in-course resources?
So this is just kind of an introductory slide for us right now,
Okay,
this
thank you.
in-course resources. Yeah, yep. Um, so yeah, we'll get into the content piece of it here. So this storyline file includes a really simplified simulation where the learner would be a person who works in a medical setting and they need to practice using electronic medical record software to record patient information during a doctor's visit. So that will be kind of what we're looking at. You all can see my screen okay, right?
Yeah, it looks great.
Yes.
Okay, great. So if we just quickly look through these content slides, you'll see that we're going to be searching for a patient. We'll be selecting the correct patient based on what we searched. We'll be entering some vitals on a couple of different screens. And so in order to get the information that the learner needs to be able to, complete this training, the first example we're going to look at is providing them this resource via a lightbox. So in order to do that, you'll see I have two scenes here. I have a course, content slides. And again, this first slide is just kind of for our purposes this evening. This isn't something the learner would have in their training or anything they would see. And then we have this patient profile scene, and it just has one slide, and I've called that our patient profile slide. And this is the information that our learner is going to need to enable them to complete this hypothetical scenario or simulation. And this is going to be accessed via Lightbox. So I just have this slide off in its own scene by itself. And you'll notice I have a big full screen or almost full screen graphic here. And this was created in Adobe Illustrator and brought into Storyline. However, this could be created completely in Storyline using shapes and the illustrations here. In fact, this is one of Storyline's characters that I just exported an image of him and put it into our Illustrator file and then brought it back into Storyline. And if we hit states while we're selected on this graphic, you'll notice that we have an additional state for this graphic, and it is our vitals state. So when we did a similar training to this, we had a ton of different patient information that needed to be provided to our learners in order for them to complete the simulation. So there was personal information on the patient, such as their name and birthday, and this information here, their insurance information. We had hypothetical vitals for them. We had exam findings. We had lab results, all kinds of things like history of their illnesses, their current illness or injury that they were in for. So one way that this could be handled, because if we tried to put all of that information on one slide, it would be really tiny, it wouldn't look very nice, and it would be kind of difficult to find the information when there's just that much on the page. It would be cognitive overload, just too much for the learner. So we can split it up. So for example, we can provide just the vitals information on one page, and this was designed to look like it's maybe the second half of the clipboard. But we could have a bunch of other states and we could provide additional information that way. So maybe there's exam findings that's a state of its own. Maybe there's lab results. For right now, for our purposes this evening, we just have one additional state and it's our vital state.
And I'm assuming
So
all of these patients are fictitious.
they are, yes, we don't want any HIPAA violations this evening.
Uh,
Yes.
HIPAA does not have a sense of humor.
No, it
No.
does not. That is for certain. All right. So we have this slide here. I mentioned that this was going to be a resource to our learner that's accessed via a lightbox. And the way they are going to open this lightbox is by an icon. So if we go back to our content slides in this other scene here, you'll notice we don't have an icon on these slides. And that's because I've put it in our slide master. I love to utilize slide masters when we have content that's going to be reused across many, many slides. So for the actual training that I've kind of amended here, we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of slides and almost that many storyline files. So it really makes sense to make it easy on yourself and put as much information just in one place to be updated if possible, which is why I really like to use Slide Master. So I'm gonna, while I'm selected on slide 1.2, the patient search, I'm going to hit the F4 key, which is the keyboard shortcut to open up the Slide Master. And you'll see that we are on a slide master layout called computer dash lightbox. And we just have a little computer graphic that I made using the shapes and storyline. And still, we don't see an icon here. That's because I have an additional layer here called icon, and that's where my icon is. And the reason that I have put it on a new layer is because I want this icon to always show up on top of any graphic, any information, any interaction, anything that's happening on my base content slide. I want this icon to always be on top of everything. And so we're able to achieve this by on this layout, adding a trigger to the slide that says show the icon layer when the timeline starts on this slide. So anytime this layout is used on a slide, it's going to immediately open the icon layer. And then you'll see we have a trigger on our icon layer that when the user clicks this icon, it will lightbox the patient profile.
Oh, that is slick.
So
Mhm.
let's go ahead and close this master view and come back to slide 1.2 and let's preview this. So we'll just go ahead and preview this slide. And you'll see we have our icon right here. Now I purposefully created an additional layer on this slide. So I'm going to close this preview and show you. I have an additional layer here called intro text. And so I've just put some introductory text here. This wouldn't necessarily need to be an additional layer, but I've done this purposefully because I want to point out something really important. So when you are using layers on a slide master, it's easy to forget that you're using layers on a slide master because you don't see them here on the base slide. And so I'm going to double click on this layer intro text to pull up the slide layer properties. It's easy to forget that you really need to check your slide layer properties or else you might have some issues. So for example, when you create a new layer on this base slide, often this visibility hide other slide layers is checked by default. So I'm going to go ahead and check that. I'm going to hit close and I'm going to preview this and see what happens. My icon disappears.
Mhm.
Why did my icon disappear? Because it's on another layer, even though we don't see it here, it's on another layer in our master. So if, whoops, if this is checked, sorry, it doesn't want to select there we go. Oh, there we go. Sorry, didn't want to open my slide layer properties. If this is checked, as soon as this intro text layer opens, it's going to hide my other layer that has the icon. So we just need to make sure when we're using layers on masters that we're really checking our slide layer properties. And I'm going to go ahead and uncheck this, close. We'll preview this once again. And you will see.
Is that selected by default, the hide other slide layers?
Usually it's, yes, usually it's checked by default and you'll have
Uh,
to go in and uncheck it. Yes. So if I hit continue here, oh, of course I have to be previewing my entire project. So let's go ahead and do that. Or at least the two scenes, the scene that contains the Lightbox slide and the scene that we're currently in.
Or otherwise you wouldn't be able to see the lightbox line.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll test this
There it
and
is.
it's working. We're able to see our patient information. So let's go ahead and fill this out. So we can see our patient's name is Connor Jacobs and he was born on March 1st, 2000. So we'll put in Jacobs, Connor, 030100, and we will search. And then once again on this slide, the learner can check, oh wait, was it Connor or Aaron? They can check. That's right, it was Connor. They can select. And then we move here to this screen where the learner might need to input their vitals. So if we hit the icon to open our light box, you'll see that we are viewing our vitals. So I'm going to go ahead and close this preview and show how we accomplished that. So navigating back to our patient profile screen in the patient profile scene, you'll remember that if I select this graphic and select states, we have an additional vitals state here that has this additional information. So I created a variable called vitals, and it's just a true or false variable. And so I created this trigger here on my patient profile screen that says set the state of the patient profile graphic, so this graphic, to vitals, our vital state, when the timeline starts on this slide, if vitals is equal to true. So the second piece of that, of course, will be we've got to set vitals to true at some point. So if we go back to our course content slides, on each of these slides, I can set vitals to false if I wanted to show the normal state, or I can set it to true over here if I want it to show the vital screen. So of course this could be, you could do this for multiple different, you could have multiple different variables if you had multiple different states, but for right now, this true or false works well for me because I just have my normal state and my vital state. So it's really easy for me to just determine, from slide to slide, which one I would like it to show.
Yeah, such a good use of states. States aren't just for buttons.
No, it's great to be able to add a whole bunch of additional information in them as well. It works really well here. So I'm going to go ahead and preview this again. I'm going to preview my entire project and I will navigate back to where we just were, which was our vital screen right here. And I'm going to go ahead and check and see. Okay, we have a temperature of 100. So I'm going to type in 100. And then let's see, a pulse of 110. Respirations, 20. O2 saturation is 98. Our blood pressure is 120/80. Height, 71 inches. Weight was 65 pounds. So that worked. We were able to open this light box and we were able to input all this information. But it was not the best experience because we had a lot of information that we needed to put in on all of these text boxes. And I don't know about you guys, but it was hard for me to remember every single one of those pieces of data to input it. I had to click the vitals icon or the patient profile icon many times. So a way we could improve this experience is instead of lightboxing, we could have a panel that opens on the side that enables our learner to still be able to type while they have it open and it's not covering up the content.
Yeah, a lot
So this
nicer.
is,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
awesome.
this is a duplicate of the previous screen. Just for purposes of this demonstration, I didn't copy all of the text boxes, but you can see you can have this open and you can type in all of them. And so once again, I'm going to close this preview and I'm going to navigate back to this slide. It's 1.5. You'll see again, that layer is handled on the slide master. We don't see it here in our slide masters or here on our slide layers, excuse me. So I'm going to hit F4 again while I'm selected on slide 1.5. And you'll see we have a duplicated slide master here. This one is called computer-side panel. And it's handled very similarly. So again, we have a trigger to show the icon when the icon layer, when the timeline starts on the slide. We have our icon layer. But this time, when the learner clicks this, instead of opening a light box, it's going to show the layer panel. And we've got an additional layer here panel. So once again, it's going to be really important here on our slide layers in the master and on our base slide that we're looking at our properties because we want to make sure that we're not closing out layers that we don't want to close because then we could hide our icon or things like that. And so you'll see I just have a couple of triggers here to show the layer icon when the user clicks the patient. Oh, I guess I actually don't need that one to show the layer because it's already open, but we do need this one to, oh no, we do. We do need this because we want to go back to this layer. So that's a good point. I almost forgot what I was, this is very important here. So if I didn't have this, it would not show our icon. It would just go back to, the blank screen without the icon. So we actually do need this trigger to show the icon layer when the user clicks patient profile, because then it would go back to this screen. Otherwise, the learner wouldn't be able to select the icon after selecting it the first time. And then we also are hiding this layer. So let's go back and look at that one more time. And that's 1.5. And I can preview just this slide because I'm not lightboxing anymore. So when they select that icon, it opens this side panel. And then when they select it again, it shows us the icon layer again. So that's
That's
why we
cool.
had that additional layer. And once again, if we look at our properties for this intro text layer that's here, we make sure that we have hide other slide layers unchecked. That's for any interactivity that you might have or any additional layers that you might have on this content. You want to make sure you're checking your slide layers, otherwise your icons might disappear.
How again
So
was the learner able to bring up the information simultaneously with seeing the fields into which they were supposed to put that information?
yeah, so they select this icon and it opens up, and this was handled in the slide master. Does that answer the question?
But I thought previously when you click that, that brought up the picture of the patient with the information, so you had to toggle back and forth between the two.
Oh, that sounds really cool. No, right now we just have the picture of the patient on these patient search slides.
Right.
And this one where they're inputting the vitals only has the vitals information on it. But we could create some additional layers here on our master, and they could toggle through different information right on this screen. That might be kind of cool. So if I went here, I could create maybe an additional layer. Actually, let me copy. Let's look at this for a second. Let me copy this and I'll call it panel 2. And maybe we'll call this exam, except I want to keep that font, exam. And maybe we'll say, I have no idea, patient has a fractured arm or something like that. And maybe we can, not super well designed on the fly here, but maybe we could create
Perfect
some
for
kind of,
demonstration purposes.
Yeah.
yeah, some kind of next button, and we could create a trigger to show the layer panel 2 when the user clicks very nicely named rectangle 8. And then on panel 2, maybe we could say back, and we could show the layer panel. Let's see if this works. Let's close this out and preview this, see if we forgot anything.
I can see how this could have been an epic project for more than one or two patients.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. And just yeah, we had one patient in one of our scenarios that had a ton of things wrong, and all of those things had to be addressed and checked for and everything. So it gets long very quickly.
I can
Yeah.
get that, yeah.
So we hit next and we get our new one.
That's cool.
So we could create a bunch of these and we could have kind of like forward and back arrows. And so the learner could kind of scroll through these. And we could design them much nicer than, this really simple one that I have just for our demonstration purposes tonight. But love that idea, John.
Now, is this information on the master slide?
Yes.
So,
So
so you're going to have like dozens or hundreds of master slides.
So you could have, sorry, I'm trying to open my slide master. There it goes. You could have just a few actual masters, but you might have a ton of layers. Or you could handle this with states. Maybe I put this text directly into this rectangle or directly into, yeah, maybe this rectangle, and then I have a ton of different states for this
Mm,
rectangle, of different text. So you could handle it with layers, you could handle it with states. You could make individual masters if you wanted to. I kind of like to keep, stick to as few masters as I can.
yeah,
Um,
that's better. You're going to have a ton of something,
yeah,
uh,
exactly. You just got to pick one.
regardless. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think the layers, what you have selected is a cleaner way to go about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it might be different for different use cases. That's one of the fun challenges that I like about working in Storyline is I like to think about, how can I do this most efficiently for this specific project that I'm working on? And I feel like I'm always learning new things about, what I can do in Storyline. So sometimes I look back at previous projects and I'm like, I cannot believe I did this way. Like I could probably look back at a project from a couple of years ago and I would have done this all on the slide level. But then when the client came back and said, oh, actually, the patient's temperature shouldn't be 100, it should be 102, not only would I have to change it on every single slide, I'd have to change it on every single slide and every single course. So it just makes it much faster to make the edits when you're able to utilize the slide masters.
Yeah, master slides are good.
Yes, for sure. So I'm going to preview this entire project again. And I'm going to go forward to where we just were. So let's do this again. Temperature of 100, pulse of 110, respiration 20, continue. All right, so our final example today, sorry, Connor speaking.
Go Connor.
So Connor just explained his symptoms to the doctor, and now we have a text entry field here. So HPI stands for history of present illness. So he just explained the symptoms or the history of his present illness. And so we could say patient complains of sore throat and fever for 3 days. So the learner could type in what they gleaned from whatever the patient just said to them and hit continue. And now when we look at our patient profile, you'll see that what I just typed in appears here. Patient complained of sore throat and fever for 3 days. So I'll close this preview. And that's another way that can be really helpful in scenarios or simulation-based training for learners to have access to a resource is if they're actually taking notes or inputting information themselves. Probably more likely to remember it if they're writing it in themselves. And so the way that we've done this is clicking on our graphic, going to the vital state. You'll see that I have this reference, HPI text entry. This is a project variable. It's a reference to a variable right here. And if I go back to my content slide here, go back to this text entry slide, you'll see that variable right here, HPI text entry. So that's the same one here that they're entering that's then referenced here. So whatever the learner types in would show up here. So that's kind of three different ways that we have handled, resources for simulations or scenarios. We have our Lightbox, which the Lightbox is really wonderful because it's such quick, easy functionality. It doesn't require, a bunch of triggers or variables or anything like that just to set up initially. So it can get you going, up and going really quickly. And it looks nice. The design that they've created for the Lightbox looks nice.
Hmm.
But then we explored, when that might not be a good option. So, for example, on a slide like this, where the learner has to put in a bunch of information, or maybe we don't want the lightbox covering up, the content that's on the slide. It's nice if your design allows it to go the side panel route. So if we go back to our slide master here, we just handled that with the layers here. So instead of light boxing, we're making use of our slide master layers. And then our last example is just kind of showing that not only can we push information to our learner, we can actually have them input information to access later. And so that kind of brings us to this next slide that has some ideas for use. So I mentioned this at the beginning. Sometimes it's nice to have help or reminders for the learner the first time they're going through training for something that's maybe new for them or something they haven't been really exposed to a lot. It can be helpful to have some help that could be gradually faded or reduced as they get better or move farther in the training. We can also do notes. So we've done training before where a learner is going through a simulation and they are able to take notes the whole time and save them to be able to help them later, to aid in decision making at a later point in the simulation, or to take back and print and save after the training it's done. And so that can be handled with a really simple line of JavaScript to be able to print or save their notes page that they've created when the training is done. Um, Information needed to complete a hypothetical scenario that doesn't fit on the slide. That's kind of what we talked about today. We've got this scenario of a patient, and in order for the learner to complete this scenario, they need to know, what's going on with this patient, what brought them in today. And that's not going to fit on the slide. So by creating this additional resource, we're able to give them that information that they need to be able to complete their training. Some other ideas would be maybe company policy, best practices, or guidance from an accreditation body. Maybe it's information that's mandatory for them to be able to complete the training. Maybe it's just supplementary. Maybe it's additional detail that the learner could choose to view voluntarily. Maybe they don't need to select that icon to be able to actually complete the scenario, but there might be additional information that they might want to know or that could be helpful. Um, so those are just some ideas that I could think of when we might be able to put these kind of tactics that we looked at today into use in our own training. And I wondered if you had any ideas for how you might be able to use these methods specifically, on your job.
Very good suggestion. I have a question first.
Yeah.
You mentioned the JavaScript. Uh,
hmm
am I correct in assuming you did not write the JavaScript yourself? Did you copy and paste that from someplace?
Yes. So in the past, I have done this where the learner has the ability to like print a certificate that's in the course or print their notes that they've typed in the course. And I
Yeah.
literally just Googled, storyline, JavaScript to print and found, you can find online where people have said, hey, like use this line of JavaScript and it works. And it does indeed work. So yeah, definitely make use of my resources that are available to me.
Right. The tech support from Articulate is just fantastic. They have a lot of
It
good
is,
support
yeah.
there.
Yes, the community, the e-learning heroes community is wonderful and yeah, it's great.
Yeah, sometimes they get back to me within 24 hours.
I know. Yeah, it's really wonderful. So yeah,
Yeah.
any questions about any of this or anything you want to look at together, play
I
around with?
Yes, a higher level. This is obviously a fictitious sort of user interface. Why are you not using the user interface that would be used on the job by the learner?
So this is just, are you talking about like this actual interface
Yeah,
here?
exactly.
So, we did create a similar training for a client recently, and we're not able to share what that software actually looks like.
Oh,
So for our client, we are using, actual screenshots of the software, but for this case demonstration purposes today, I was not able to use those screenshots. So I just quickly created, this example to share. But I think definitely if you were doing an actual software simulation, you would want to use the actual software for sure.
yeah.
Unless, let's say the scenario was just actually teaching the patient the questions they needed to ask, and maybe they're not actually inputting this in any specific software. It's more just, them being able to think about and come up with the correct procedure. Then maybe it wouldn't matter as much what the screens looked like. Maybe you would have something designed like this if it wasn't actually the software that you were really having them practice.
I was assuming that was the case. You wanted to teach them in the abstract, so if the
Hmm.
patient information system was changed, they got something else, they got something different. It doesn't look like this anymore. Well, that doesn't make any difference because they were trained on this and they knew that this was a pretend thing.
Exactly. Yeah, different objectives. If the objective is to train them on the specific software, then you'd want to do that. But if it's not, then I would say, yeah, you use something that's not a specific software.
Yeah,
Because then, like you said, when it inevitably changes, then they won't be stuck.
yeah, very nice demonstration. I'm trying to
Yes.
respond to your question about other things that could be put in here. And when we heard you said earlier that the patient is talking, so uh, why did we
Yeah.
not hear that?
So I just created a layer of our patient. I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear my audio, but if you preview
Oh,
this screen 1.6,
right.
I just put in some text to speech here in Storyline, and our patient just says, let's see, let's edit our text to speech here.
All right. When we went to share screen, we didn't click the little box for uh, include the audio. That's what it
Yeah.
was.
So he just says, we just have this little character in Storyline, and he just says, I woke up a few days ago with a really scratchy throat. It's been sore for 3 days. I also think I'm running a fever. So this is something you could incorporate in your training as well to have, the patient speaking with the provider or the clinician or whoever it is, the receptionist. And then this layer goes away. This layer fades out after he finishes speaking. It takes us back to our base layer, and then the clinician is able to input what they learned from him speaking. So he said he has a sore throat and he has a fever. So the clinician would practice documenting that here.
Okay. Did the release have captions on it so that the learner could read what was spoken as well as
Yes.
try to remember it?
Yeah, I believe so. Yep, we've got
Okay.
captions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very nice because in this type of learning situation, sometimes if you hear more than three words in a row, you can't remember what the whole thing was.
Yeah.
Would you use this as because I like the way that it's set up. I'm fairly new to this. I've only been really doing this training role for about 9 months, so I'm
Okay.
really trying to learn as much as I can and be a sponge. But we do a lot of assessments at
Okay.
our company, and this to me seems like that's kind of how it's set up without any like point system, right? So would this be easily, it seems like it could be turned into like an assessment.
Yeah. So actually that the client work that we did, we had two pieces and one of them was an assessment. And so it was the same content the entire time. So both were simulations, but
Hmm.
the first one was guided. So there were tooltips that appeared on screen, call out boxes telling the learner exactly what to do at each step. So it would say, enter the learner's last name. They would do it, and then it would pop up, enter the learner's first name, enter the learner's date of birth, select search, and it, guides them every single step of the way. And then the
Yeah.
assessment piece of it just took out those help, those pointers. And if they did not select the correct area or, enter text in the correct area, they would get a try again message and they could try again a couple of times, and then if they still didn't get it right, which the try again would tell them, it would say remember to enter the last name. So if they still didn't get it correct, then we could have an incorrect feedback layer that says, you didn't get it right. This is what you should have done. And then it would have advanced them to the next slide. So yeah, I think this is
Okay.
something that can definitely be made into an assessment.
Awesome. I do a lot of those, so that's why when I saw this, I was like, oh man, this is really cool.
Yeah.
Um, so all right, awesome.
Was there any type of branching in here so different learners who were focusing on a specific type of patient could see just that type of patient?
That's a really great question. This could have been, one huge course that branched off, but what we actually ended up doing is splitting it into a bunch of smaller courses simply because that was just going to be easier for everybody to handle and just kind of easier to group it off by, this patient, this specific diagnosis. But you certainly could make a giant course with a bunch of branching.
Right, right. So with the branching, you would allow the learner to self-select into which specialty they are
You
working.
could. That would be really interesting. Yeah, they could select which job role they had or which type of patient they wanted to see. So maybe they wanted to specifically view a patient that had a certain injury or maybe a patient that had an illness. Because maybe they needed to practice the process for an x-ray or splinting a broken bone, or maybe they really needed to look at a patient's symptoms and try and see if they could determine what illness they should then test that patient for. So yeah, I think there's a bunch of options that you could do.
Right, and I see a real option for scenarios that take this further. You can
Mhm.
step through different treatment for that sore throat and see what happens after that,
Hmm.
how the
Yeah.
patient responds, and what else would be prescribed for
Yeah, did you
those
give them the
particular
right,
symptoms.
yeah, did you give them the right prescription or did you diagnose them correctly and give them the correct treatment? Then what happens if you didn't? There could be a ton of different branches. Yeah, that would be
Yeah,
really cool.
Yeah, this is very nicely done.
yeah.
Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate the participation today.
Well,
Oh, thank you.
thank you very much for letting us see your work here. This is great,
Yeah,
and not particularly like the use of states. So often states are associated with buttons. Is it pushed or is it a hover or is it a visited? And no, there are lots of different things you can do with states.
Yes, I love to make use of states in whatever ways I can think of.
Right, right. In fact, I think that's what you were talking about at the a conference where I heard you. You were talking about using states to take notes.
Yes, yeah. So we were taking notes and we had the notes appearing in different states. So we had different learning points, and each of those learning points was associated with a state. And then we had variables that controlled when those states changed and showed the additional information.
Right.
So similar concept to this, yeah.
Yeah, very good use of letting all the differentiators in storyline, what storyline can do that other things cannot do, how the states work with the triggers and the triggers work with the variables and the variables
Hmm.
drive what trigger happens when what the layer comes up with. Yeah, that sort of thing. Anyway, is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think that's it, unless anybody's got any questions.
Okay, Jody, do you have any further questions?
no, sir. Um,
Oh,
I really appreciate everything that you've shown us today, so thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. I think John said he was going to put my email in the chat. So if you ever have questions about anything, please feel free to email me or connect with me on LinkedIn, and I would love to help in any way that I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I will. Thank you so much.
Great.
with that, I will say good night. Thank you again, Julia. Certainly appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Hope to see you later on in the year when we come back in August.
Absolutely.
Sounds
Okay.
great.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.